This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9.
I'd like to call to order the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors this Tuesday, August 15th. And our first moment of action will be for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now I have Mike Conlon share a moment of reflection with us.
Well, I think we've all heard in the media the news of the riots and whatnot with the protesting, the statue of Andy Jackson, I believe it was, downtown. And it just struck me that that's a shame, but it also made me reflect on how blessed we are that we still do have the right to protest, and we still do have the right to make our voices heard and to express our opinions. And I only pray that we can continue, as we've done for much of our history, to do it civilly and with respect for the opposition opinion. So I just would like to thank God for the blessings and the rights that we have and the form of government we have that recognizes that we do have these rights. Among them is to protest and make your voice heard. And I just wish everybody would try to be more respectful. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Now would you please take your keypads and record your presence at this meeting this evening. And we have a quorum present, and so we can continue with the business of the day. At this point in time, we have need to approve the journal of proceedings from our July 18th meeting, and a motion by Supervisor Mortimer, seconded by Supervisor Anton. Are there any corrections or additions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries, and the minutes from July 18th are approved. At this point in time, at each of our meetings, we have an opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone here wishing to address the board? Anyone wishing to address the board? And I don't see any takers, so we will move on to the next item on our agenda. And that's the reports to the county board under our county code. The first one, Catherine, would you like to introduce?
Yes, thank you. This evening, the board will be hearing from Brock Guyon. He is with Clifton Larson Allen. He is part of the firm that conducted our audit for 2016, and he will be providing an update to the board as a whole on the results of that audit. Also, I would like to introduce this evening Amy Wong. Amy is the new finance director. She has been with the county for 2 months, and her first piece of business with the board is to follow up Brock's presentation on the audit with a second quarter report for your perusal and edification. And so without further ado, I would turn the podium over to first Brock and then Amy. Thank you.
All right, good evening. Those of you that were here last year know that what I'd like to do is cover at a very high level the results of the audit. And we're talking about the 2016 audit tonight. And so at any point, jump in if you have questions. I'm going to go through things fairly quickly and, again, keep it pretty high level. There's a lot of detail that goes into your audits. Spent quite a bit of time with Budget and Finance. Is that the right committee name? Earlier already. We talked about the details and had a great discussion there. So you should have two booklets this evening. Electronic versions are available as well, but one's called an executive audit summary. The other one is a financial statement. The thicker one, the financial statement, that'll be for reference. You can, some late night perusing there if you would like. I'm going to stick to the summary. Everything that you need to hear from us is included in that, and gives you a little different perspective, a little better information, in my opinion, for a lot of the things. So if we want to start there, again, I'm not going to cover everything here, but page 1 talks about the reports we've issued. So I'll start there. And first and foremost, we talk about the bigger booklet, the audit report, or there's what's called an audit opinion included in there. That is the one piece technically that is Clifton Larson Allen's. The rest is the county's, the numbers and the disclosures. We have issued what's called an unmodified opinion. That's the one you strive to achieve. That's the one that tells you that the amounts and disclosures are materially correct. It's the highest level you can receive. We also issue a report on internal controls. And as you know, there's been considerable activity in this regard over the last 18 months or so. And last year we came up here, we talked about 3 items specifically that ended up in your report. This year there's only 2. So let me just talk about the one that went away. There was one that talked about the fact that we draft an annual financial statement, the thicker booklet. While that's still the case, we did come up with an approach. It involved a considerable amount of homework, if you will, for the county. They had to do some things to basically demonstrate the fact that they've reviewed it, approved it, and know the amounts and disclosures in there just as well as we do. So in doing that and going through that process, we established an ability to be able to agree that we no longer have a material weakness there. That finding goes away. So then what you have left are 2 items. Let me talk about material audit adjustments. That's listed on there as 2016-001. This one is very common. I want to give you some perspective though. So last year, our first year with you for the 2015 audit, we proposed 104 corrections to your books. Those are called audit entries. That's quite a few. We do have other clients that we post that many as well, but the goal and the objective was to reduce that number, have less reliance on your auditor. And you indeed did that. We were down to 57. That is, cutting in half essentially. That took a lot of work. There's a lot of prep and action that went into that. And even with that, it was limited to about 3 areas that even captured half of those. There's new folks, for example, in particular departments. They were new to it. We kind of helped them out with the reconciling process. It's anticipated going forward, they're going to be able to eliminate quite a few of those entries again next year. So I expect this one to go down. This one could go away. And again, for perspective, we have the same finding for many, many clients. We do propose a lot of adjustments. The last one, limited segregation of duties, probably more on the forefront of your guys' minds. We talked about this at length. You've spent an enormous amount of effort in the last couple of years addressing this particular instance. Now you have to keep this in mind. Again, as of 12/31/16, technically when our audit covers, not everything was resolved, right? So the things are ongoing. Significant improvements have been made. Last year, I spent quite a bit of time up here talking about very specific things too. I don't plan on doing that this evening. It could go for an hour or 2. We don't want to do that. But I do want to share that there has been, we've gone through, there's corrective action plans for things that aren't addressed yet. There are a great deal, a number of things that I've already taken care of that have kind of fallen off the list, if you will. And so we are seeing improvements there on an ongoing basis. The only thing maybe holding that up, you did have some, again, transition in staffing that had slowed things up a little bit, but you're still making progress. If you want additional information on that, I'll gladly try to answer any particular questions tonight, but again, you can contact the Office of Administration. They've got a detailed list that's tracking all these items that have been suggested in the last couple of years. Okay. The third and last report we issue is on compliance, and we have no findings there. So that's with your grants and any kind of contracts. We review those as part of the audit as well. So that brings us to, that's a high summary of the audit reports that we issue. I'm going to move you next into the financial highlights. So you got to work through the booklet a little bit. The next couple sections are more informational. There's a required disclosures letter that's very standard from year to year. There's a section on page 6 of new audit standards that's more entertaining for your finance people. So we'll skip over that, and we'll get to page 7. And here we'll just point out a couple of your financial highlights from 2016. You've got 4 years of comparison, and the first thing we'll talk about is your general operating fund. And in particular, probably point out 2 things here. The second to last row, you'll see one that's called change in fund balance. There's a negative there of $123,000. That's essentially the operating results of your general fund for the year. It did have expenditures that exceeded revenues by $123,000. On your level of budget, that's pretty close. And to give you perspective, you did have 2 items in there that were a bit unusual this year that fall on that net other financing sources uses line. There was a $1 million insurance recovery, that's to the good. And then there was a $2.4 million transfer out, or money that went from the general fund to make the HS fund whole, or down to 0. I'll talk about that here in a little bit more later. So being able to do that, the general fund having reserves in order to be able to help out another fund, that's essentially what that's one of the key examples of why you look to have reserves in the general fund. So how are we doing at year end then? If you look at the 3 shaded rows there, the first one is called unassigned. That's kind of your true reserves, an indicator of what you have in equity at the end of the year, the $12.1 million. We compare that to essentially what you spend for the year, the second shaded row of $33.7 million, and we come up with the ratio at the bottom, that third shaded row, and you're at 36%. That means essentially you can carry yourself through your expenditures at 36% of the year, or 3 to 4 months. If you look at it that way. County policy has you between a minimum of 20% and a maximum of 30%. That's the kind of the budgetary objective. As a rule of thumb, we kind of preach 25 to 33% as a minimum. That's that 3 to 4 months. Our clients, we like to see above that. There's a variety of reasons why strong fund balance is good. I won't get into those tonight. But we work with 10 counties, and the average for them is 48%. So it's a bit higher than where you're at. You're above your own policy, above our own rule of thumb. I'd put you in good shape, okay, for the general fund. And that's in spite of absorbing a transfer to the HS fund as well. So with that in mind, I want you to, we'll take you through a couple other additional funds, though, here on page 8. And now we're just looking at year-end reserves or fund balance in each one of these funds here. These are the rest of your governmental funds. That HHS fund, you'll see had been negative. Large losses in 14 and 15 generated these losses. There was still an operating loss of a couple $100,000 during 2016, but the decision was made to use the general fund to bring this fund back to 0. That's pretty common in the county clients we work with for them to make that decision. Most of them do it as on an annual basis. If there's an excess in the H fund, it comes back to the general fund. If there's a deficit, the general fund kicks in and makes it whole to 0 again. That's very, very common. That's what happened here this year in 2016. So we'll keep an eye on that going forward. But it is starting at base 0 now at the end of 16. But the only other thing in that section, you do have these other funds that the intent is for them to operate independently. You do have a deficit there in your anti-drug program, a deficit that will be reviewed during the 18 budget. Let's see here. So item number 3 talks about your debt service fund. Okay, this is the fund where you pay your principal and interest on your long-term borrowings. So you do have $3.8 million there. Quite a bit of activity rolls through this fund. You had $14 million refunding. So what happens there is you issued $14 million of new debt to pay off old debt that was at a higher rate. That's to the benefit of the county. You also paid about $7 million of principal and interest during the year out of this fund as well. So it stayed relatively consistent from the end of 15 to the end of 16. And you do have some options with this $3.8 million, which is another good indicator here. This is a result of debt premiums. When you issue a bond, for example, you either get a premium or a discount. The premium is an additional cash that the county would receive. So that has been deposited here, oftentimes required by the bonding documentation to ensure you can meet your principal and interest payments. Okay. You've also, over time, have levied to cover your principal and interest. So this is actually, at this point in time, in essence, available to you for future principal and interest payment, meaning you could levy less and redirect those levy dollars to something else because you do have these reserves here. So that's a good indicator. Item number 4 does have a positive. This is your capital projects fund. Has a positive $908,000, but I want to give you some perspective on this. If you look at 15, there's a deficit. Okay, this fund had generated or overspent, if you will, to the tune of $2.7 million. During 2016, you issued $12.6 million of new debt for very specific projects. You plan on spending the full amount of 12.6. It's just a timing issue here where you spent $3 million on capital and you transferred $6.7 million off to the highway. So truly what's left out of that bond issue is about $2.9 million, which will be spent here in 17, or maybe already has, which means, where does that leave you? You will be at a deficit in this fund once that bond proceeds is spent down. You'll be right back down to a negative 2.7, everything else being equal. So here's where I want to give you perspective that while you do have some options in your general fund, you've got a healthy fund balance, you might have to make some decisions on that to make this whole at some point. And also that debt service fund balance there, you might have to redirect some of those levy dollars that you have been applying to your levy limit towards eliminating this deficit as well. The good news is you have some options, and in total you're doing in pretty good shape. Hopefully that all made sense. Okay, then we'll move on to page 9. And here we talk about your first-year highway department. And right in the middle of the page, in the bottom of the highway department section, you'll see net operating income or loss. There's a positive $2.1 million. Okay, that's the results for the year. The revenue sources exceeded expenditures by $2.1 million. Part of that is timing. You did have positive results of operations, about $200,000. That's good news. There's some efficiencies from providing services. Costs are down. Dollars per mile has gone down. That's helped. But the excess here is largely due to that. I mentioned earlier, you transferred $6.7 million of the debt proceeds over into this fund, so it's kind of a timing issue of when that gets spent. So that's part of the reason why it seems higher than maybe the operational results were. But again, the operations were good. Next fund is your airport fund. And at the very bottom of the page, second to last row, you see the change in that position again. That's your income or loss. There's a loss of $902,000. This fund does have $1.4 million of depreciation every year, though. It's a very, there's a big infrastructure involved in an airport operation. It's capital assets that do depreciate over time. So you take this $1.4 million hit expense every year for depreciation. Operationally wise, then it did turn out positive, as far as the fees collected versus operational expense. But the reality is, you do have to monitor this. This is a real expense. It is depreciation. That infrastructure will have to be replaced at some point. So that's something to keep your eye on, even though you've had kind of larger deficits here the last few years. At the moment, you're in pretty good shape there in the airport fund. On page 10, your last fund we'll talk about is your internal service fund. This is your workers' comp and property casualty and general liability fund. The only thing I really look at here to analyze the health is that total change in net position right in the middle of the page, positive $404,000, and your trend has been positive. That just means your premiums exceeded your claims for the year. It has for the last 4 years. That's a very good trend. That's what you hope your insurance funds do. That can turn the other way, and we've seen that with other counties as well. That will at some point it'll go the other way. So the important part is to maintain, and that is certainly what it's doing. And then the last thing I'll cover here is item number 7. That's just a summary of your outstanding debt. We already talked about the debt you've issued and refunded during the year. Just maybe look at that very last row. That 21.1% is a measurement against the statutory limit you're allowed to borrow that's tax dollar supported. Okay, so for counties, that can be anywhere from 5 to 30% typically. You're definitely in that zone. It wouldn't necessarily be practical to levy 100% mill rates, and taxes would go up very, very high. So from that standpoint, you're right in the kind of the ballpark of everybody else. So that's all the comments I planned on covering tonight. Again, pretty quick, pretty high level, but I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Jerry, Supervisor.
If you could go back for me, I didn't quite catch it, and tell me about the reserve fund, what page that was on. And you talked about that it could free up, we could have used that and free up levy dollars. What page was that on?
Page 8.
Page 8,
yep.
And the number was what?
Right in the middle of the page, there's a debt service fund, $3.8 million.
So we got $3.8 million sitting there we could use as a alternative
It's a little tricky, but yes, to answer your question, generally speaking. What is in there right now, you have to use, it's restricted for debt service. Okay, so you've issued debt. Part of that, you receive some money that they require you to use for principal and interest. They don't require you to necessarily, they don't care how you come up with the rest of the dollars to pay for it. Okay, the tricky part comes in your the state and how that impacts your levy limit. You'll be talking about this in the budget here shortly. Basically, there's a calculation. It limits how much you can levy, and part of the statute says, here's your base. You don't want to lose your base. That's critical. Okay, that's a critical part of this. So you don't want to drop it because you're using this $3.8 million. Instead, what I mean by being able to free up levy dollars is the statute reads you're allowed to levy above your base to pay principal and interest. That's exactly what you have been doing over time. So that additional piece goes towards it, and that's why you have an excess here. You've levied to pay the principal and interest when you've had some dollars from a bond issue to pay for it. What almost all of our clients would do in this scenario, if you do have reserves, whether it's $100 or $3.8 million, is you'd apply that at some point in a future budget to pay for principal and interest. You'd still take advantage of having that debt service levy in your levy limit calculation. You don't want to lose your base. And then you could use those dollars and redirect them for something else. The statute doesn't say how you use it. It just allows you to levy for it.
Okay, thank you. A couple other questions. In the past, as you pointed out, we had an excessive amount of reversing entries, and that we have substantially dropped this year 50%. We still need to work on it, but that's significant progress. Of those 50% less reversing entries, were there any that caused you or staff some heartburn?
Heartburn. It's defined differently for different auditors, I suppose, but not necessarily.
One or two in particular you want to draw to the attention of this board?
I don't think so. Like I said, I think there's 3 or 4 areas. If you look at the nature of those 57 entries we proposed, that I think your staff already know how to address. You know, you had new people in highway, for example. There were certain tax-related entries that came out in the reconciliation. I can't think of the other one offhand, but there's two other additional areas that I believe will probably go away next year. So that didn't necessarily cause us heartburn. We're glad to help in that situation. So it's
okay. Final thing, which you can't really address this evening, and the board can certainly follow it up with their finance director. This board went on record, and that's why you're here tonight, that we wanted to see the full audit, and really appreciate the fact you gave us copies, our finance director, of the bigger one, because we need to bring those back to our respective committees and zero in on the areas that we're responsible for on how we're doing. The one thing that you reference in your executive audit summary a number of times that we can't ask questions on is the management letter, and also along with us wanting to see the full audit as a full board, we also indicated we want to have copies of the management letter and then also the corrective action plan that's submitted to you, and then at a later date a report that it's been carried through with. So we make sure, as our number one responsibility is fiduciary, so that we make sure we never fall back into the trap of year after year after year getting the same report in our audit and never a correction. So just so you're aware, we haven't received that, unless I missed it, yet, but I anticipate that we will down the line.
Yep, and clarify that, you will. There's a third report. It's not issued yet. It's the report that has your federal and state awards in it, okay? So that's a single audit report is what we call it.
That too we should receive, but I'm talking about, don't you do a management letter that you're referencing here a number of times that I recall it in your letter that you referenced it. What did you call it?
Yeah, that's in that internal control section, and we refer to that.
We haven't
Yep.
seen that, and of course, that's a
Yep.
major concern of this
Right.
board, that we continue to make progress.
There is a filing with the feds that has to occur by the end of September, September 30th.
Okay.
So the push is to get the financial information and your Form A, which is a financial report
Okay.
form that doesn't have any management letter information to it, to the state by the end of July. So that's kind of the deadline, if you will. That gets done, and now from here, between now and the end of September, we have to get that federal filing, which tells the feds exactly what you spent for federal dollars. They want to know that. There's a form that you have to do online. And with that is the single audit report. At the end of it is your management letter.
Oh,
So that's
okay.
where all the findings would be. I've highlighted what we're going to put in there. We know that already.
Okay.
We don't have it yet.
That too, I suspect governing committees will want to zero in on their respective areas that they have responsibility for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Supervisor Conlon.
Again, on page 8, and I just want to touch base on that number 4 capital projects funds. From what you said, my understanding is the $900,000 surplus we have is a timing issue, and that if we waited a month or 2 or 3, it would be down to a negative 2.5 million.
Correct.
Basically.
Yeah.
Is that an appropriate use for the debt service fund balance? Or portion of it, I should say?
Not directly. The 3.8 million has to stay and be used for principal and interest. You would use what you would ordinarily levy in there to pay for like 18's principal and interest, and you'd redirect those levy dollars to probably work away against that deficit. Would be an option. I'm not telling you to do it as far as that goes, but that would be an option available to you.
Can you tell me what the source of the capital fund balance deficit, I mean,
Well,
is?
It goes back
Is
quite a
overages and
Yeah.
capital project costs,
Yep.
basically?
Yep, yeah, if you look back, it goes obviously well before our time, but I think 11, 12, somewhere in there maybe rings a bell, where bonds were issued, debt was issued, didn't cover all the cost overruns, and it just hasn't been funded since.
So we haven't, it dipped a long time ago, we
Yeah.
just haven't filled the hole.
Exactly.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Supervisor Leary, please.
Thank you. I had a question regarding page 11 in the enterprise fund for the highway. And I noted that the tax receivable in 2016 is a lower figure than in 2013. And so I was wondering, are we abnormal in this category, or is this happening elsewhere? And why are we having less tax receivable for highway than 3 or 4 years ago? Do you know? It's under Fund 701 Highway Department is the third or second line.
Trying to think, I don't want to give you the wrong answer here, but I'm pretty sure it means if you look back at your budgets between 16 and 15, you allocated less levy to the highway fund in 16 than 15, because that would be a representation of what you expected to collect in 17. It's a receivable that you're going to collect in a subsequent year. It's not delinquents which are carried elsewhere. So I think if you looked at your budget, you as a board applied less levy dollars to the highway department.
Supervisor Challenges.
Thank you. 2 questions. Page 7, kind of balance sheet here in the liability section. There's a term there, deferred inflows. I'm just not familiar with that term, but it's certainly the vast majority of the liabilities. Can you describe to me what deferred inflows are?
Yes. Well, I can try. It's technical. You might refer, the terminology changed 2 years ago. Probably would have been called deferred revenue in the past, which means you're going to recognize the revenue in a future period. This big number here offsets the taxes receivable in the general fund's case. So you got $13.8 million of taxes receivable. A portion of that is delinquent. So if you peel that off, what's left is the tax revenue you've adopted and levied for the subsequent year. So here it'd be 17. It'd be revenue you're going to recognize. So what, if nothing else happened, this, where'd it go? Deferred revenues, part of that $12.6 million is your taxes receivable that you're going to collect in 17. That would clear to revenue. You'd recognize it as revenue in 17. And then, of course, you replace that with the next year's levy. So it's a rolling thing. It just offsets the receivable listed above.
Thank you. I don't see any other requests to speak.
Excuse me, I have one other question.
Oh, wait a sec.
One other question, then back on page 8, the debt service fund balance again. Well, I assume that this ongoing balance that we're carrying represents tax levy dollars that we put into that fund over the years that we haven't used for principal and interest. Is that accurate?
In part, it's mostly bond premium. So when you issue $10 million of par value of debt, the bond buyers pay you $10 million plus a premium of, say, $500,000 or something like that. That has been placed in here when you issued it. So that cash proceeds went here. It wasn't used for principal and interest. It could have been, but it's just being held there in reserves or for some future period to be paying for principal and interest. And it's built up.
So part, I guess where I was going with that is trying to understand how we determine every year how much we put into that fund.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume we can look at what the debt service is going to be for the year, and so
Yep.
we should know what the gazintas ought to be, right? If we know what the gazatas are, so.
Right.
What, how do we determine that?
Yep. That's part of the budget process. I'm sure, I can't speak to how it's handled in the past, but I know when I help my clients out with their budget, what we do is we know it's, we look at the amortization repayment schedules. We know it's going to be paid for principal and interest. We add them up. We come up with a number, and that is your debt service levy. We always add that. Not always the full amount. There's some tricks around it. Your levy limit is very technical, and you don't want to overdo it, so to speak. You can mess up your base. We don't want to do that. But for the most part, it's relatively straightforward in that regard. You just add up your principal and interest, what you expect to pay in that next year only. You add that in there as a budget item. You actually pay that, so the revenues and expense offset. It usually nets to zero. We see debt service funds at flat zero often, with the exception of when, in this case like you, which happens and occasionally, when bond premium is added in there, they don't account for that in the budget process. So you could have in a prior years levied less, or again, redirected those dollars somewhere else. But you just haven't done that yet. So the good news here is you've got reserves, you've got the ability, and you've got options.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Wilkie,
Following up on that one more time, for the third time on that one.
Okay.
If I heard you right, that can be used to pay for interest and debt.
Yep.
The majority of it. What's the minority number?
Minority number.
I'm hearing you say the 3.8 can be used to pay for interest and debt on capital. Is that correct?
Correct, yep.
But I think I also heard you said the majority of it. That tells me there's a minority there. What's the minority number?
Oh, I don't know that there's a minority. That is all that this fund pays for. There's some issue costs, for example, stuff like that. Fees related to debt, you can pay for that as well. So there really is no other. I don't know if I maybe was thinking one thing if I slipped that word in there, but the majority, all of it, you could pay for.
There's money in there that can free up for levy dollars there, and you're telling me the majority has to be used for to pay interest or
Yeah.
debt.
Right, I would say probably all of it.
Broken out?
I think you'd probably say all of it, without looking specifically at your bond issuances, but that's my understanding. I'm not aware of any restrictions, put it that way.
Supervisor Pagonis, do you want to add to that, please?
Well, I just want to make sure we're clear that when we levy for capital, we can only use it for principal and interest. We can't use those additional levy dollars for operations, which is where I think Supervisor Wilkie might have been going. I mean, it has to be used for the purpose that it was levied for, because state statute requires us to be at 0% on operating. So if we levy additional dollars for a capital expense because we're incurring debt, it has to be used for some debt-related item, for principal and interest. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fine.
He's not agreeing with me. Wait, Brock's not agreeing with me.
Majority, that means there's a minority
But
amount.
Brock's not agreeing, so I want to see what the difference is here.
That would, in a normal scenario, you are right. But if you look at the way the levy limit wording is used, it doesn't actually tell you that. What it says is it restricts you as far as how you can calculate what you can levy. It has really no bearing or direction or requirements on how you spend it. So you can actually use your base levy, add in a debt service levy, that's your total levy. You could spend that any way you want, is the honest answer.
I think I'd like to see an opinion from Corporation Counsel before we move into that direction.
Fair enough.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. And so thank you for your report.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Now, would you like to introduce Amy?
Yes, actually, Amy Wong is our new finance director. Amy has joined us this evening. She will be presenting a report that she has constructed that gives an update for quarter 2 of 2017. This is part of a report that you will see on an ongoing basis every quarter, and that as she works with Finance and Budget Committee, they may be adding more to it and enhancing it even further. But Amy, would you like to address the board?
Good evening. So thank you for the introduction, Catherine. We'll start with the Q2 report, which is building off of Brock's presentation. So I'll turn your attention to the landscape report here. It's 2 pages. So one of my main goals for the finance department is to really focus on providing information to departments and to the county board on a timely basis, which is why we've created these reports. Throughout the year, we're going to continue looking at the information that we're providing to make sure it's useful and is impactful. And as time progresses, the reports may change a little bit. We might add more reports. So currently today we have a couple of reports. The first one, the landscape one, provides a holistic view of where the county sits as of June 30th. I'll note the format is very similar to the presentation that Brock just presented. So it starts with the general fund. We break out our major governmental funds, which is human services, debt service, and capital projects. We break out our enterprise funds, which is airport and highway, and then our special revenue funds on the second page. I'll turn your attention to the second page. We're really comparing how we're tracking compared to budget. So looking at total county on the second page, for total expenditures, we're at 44% compared to our budget for 2017, and for total revenues, we're at 34.39%. Now, going back into specifics, we'll go back to page 1. A lot of the differences are due to timing, so I'll highlight some of the main ones that I've identified. In revenue, if you look at information systems and purchasing, you note that their total revenues compared to the budget is much lower than the expected 50%, because this is for 50% of the year. Part of the reason is because we do internal allocations to departments. Those allocations have not been done. So again, that would be timing. Those allocations will be done during Q3 and Q4, so then the next report would be more consistent with expectations. For Treasury, again, that's due to timing. Included in the revenue figures is interest and penalty on delinquent taxes. Taxes were due August 20th, so we'll see this number become closer to the budget come Q3 and Q4. And you'll also see Register of Deeds and ADRC on page 2. They look like they're in a deficit position, but again, it's due to timing. ADRC, they do match calculations toward the end of the year. So we expect as the year moves on, we'll get closer to actual budgets. So overall, general funds is on target. Total expenditures is about 44% of budgeted expenditures, and total revenue is about 37%. Nothing too unusual there given the timing differences we've discussed. Health and Human Services Fund, you can see that they're showing a deficit of $4 million. A large portion of that is due to timing as well. Part of it is they record expenses as they're incurred into the general ledger, but revenues are typically recorded at a later date once the reconciliations have been completed and submitted to state and federal funding. For enterprise funds, you'll notice that Highway is showing a deficit, but the reason for that is due to timing because we have not completed bonding for 2017. The expected date for that is October, so we'll see that closer to budget at that time. And then the last one I wanted to highlight on the funds was the internal service funds on page 2. we perform an internal allocation for our insurance expenses. Typically, this has been done in Q4, so currently revenues looks quite low compared to budgets, but that should pick up in Q3 and Q4 once we've performed the allocations. On page 2, we've also summarized the fund balances, so the presentation is consistent with the report that Brock provided. You can see the December 31st, 2016 balances and where we're sitting as of June 30th, 2017. And then we've also presented Eau Claire County debts. Debt payments for principal are due September, so the movement in the balance between year end and June 30th is minimal. It's about $80 million outstanding. I'll turn your attention to the second report, which is the portrait report. This provides additional detail on specific revenue sources. The first one is outstanding property taxes. As of June 30th, we're showing total outstanding taxes of $35 million uncollected. As of Monday, we are at $3.1 million. The due date was August 20th, so we've collected a majority of it. And based on discussions with departments, we do anticipate another large collection in September once notices have been issued. On page 2, we're presenting our sales tax collections compared to where we were at prior year. So the last column on page 2 of the first table shows that as of the end of July, we've collected 41% cumulative for the year, which is higher than prior year, which was about 38%. So we're tracking a little bit ahead in the sales tax. Expenditures, we're comparing budget to actual, a little bit more of a detailed breakdown. Wages and salaries, a little bit less than budget. Supplies and services, pretty much on track with budget, which is expected because we don't expect a lot of seasonality with supplies. Capital outlay can spike depending on timing of purchases, so there's not really a clear trend there. And then the last page, we've presented a couple of additional economic indicators, just a little bit more detail so you can see what the budget is versus how we're tracking actually. I think that's it for the reports. I really just wanted to start providing these to the county board so then you can see throughout the year where we're sitting and have that level of detail so then we can make the timely decisions, especially during the budget process, while this information would become very useful. Any questions?
First of all, a big thank you. The administrator well knows this is something that's been asked for a lot of years, okay? More than I want to admit to. And in less than a year, you came up with what I've been looking for a long time. No more excuses by this board that we can't do our fiscal oversight.
Exactly.
We've got to do a little work on this, and we've got to get used to reading it and understanding it and asking questions. Therefore, one request I have of you in the future, it would be very useful if we could get these in advance, because obviously...
Agreed, right. There's a lot of information to digest.
I'm not complaining, just as long as that be the case, because it's hard to digest and it takes some time to look. I very much appreciated not only the numbers, the comparisons, the knowing where our levy's coming from, but you also made some comments in very concise ways to draw to our attentions. Conclusion, economic indicators, that is, I think, of real value to the board. One thing you might want to consider on this one, and I don't think it has to be longer than this, you'd have to do pretty fine print, maybe go to 2, but not longer. Comments that you want to draw out to our attention, some of what you did there, but of course it's hard to follow then, might be very useful. That indicators, especially you're having the eagle eye there even better than us. We can't totally count on you, but we count on you to draw to our attention if there's some concern in a particular area. If I heard right, you're going to be doing this every 3 months to the board?
Correct, yeah.
That I think is excellent. We should never, in the history of this county, ever have a situation where a surprise, we're $1 million short in an account, and that happens. We'll see it along the way, which assists us to make policy decision, as well as the manager, I'm sure, is making management decisions to try to close that gap.
Exactly, yep.
No questions at this point, but
Okay.
a big thank you and job well done.
You're welcome, thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. I'm not seeing anyone else wishing to comment.
Perfect, thank you.
And the next item on our agenda is the Beargrass Dairy. Going to give us a presentation, I believe. And welcome. Welcome, Don and Tammy Schrager.
She can't go anywhere.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your meeting tonight. My name is Tammy Smith Schroeder. My husband back there that won't come up and join us is Don Schroeder. We are two of the owners of Bearsgrass Dairy. Greg Leonard from Land Conservation is my technical support. I'm not a computer person, so I asked him to help me put things together. I want to tell you a little bit about our farm. There are 4 owners of Bearsgrass Dairy. There's all 4 of us pictured there with one of our cows. We are an incorporated farm, Bearsgrass Dairy Incorporated, but we are a family farm. The second picture shows the people that work at our farm. They are all family except for the 2 Hispanics. Otherwise, everybody else is family that works full-time and part-time. If you want to be an owner in Bearsgrass Dairy, you have to work there. You not only have to have capital invested, you have to invest blood, sweat, and tears. And we have a lot of that invested. Our main purpose for coming here tonight is to tell you about an event called Farm City Day. Farm City Day is an agricultural education event that is sponsored in part by UW Extension. The UW Extension of Eau Claire, Dunn, and Chippewa County have put this event together. This year, Bearsgrass Dairy will be hosting it. It is the 10th annual Farm City Day, and our main purpose for being here is to invite each and every one of you out to our farm and see what a farm is about. The date is going to be Friday, September 8th. That is the day that we are going to have 4th graders there. We have about 900 4th graders coming. There are learning stations that they will be going through, hands-on learning things about the farm, farm safety, animal nutrition, rural road safety, things like that we're going to be talking about. They get a whole complete tour of the farm. Any place that they want to go, they can ask questions about, they can see it. This event is rotated between Eau Claire, Dunn, and Chippewa counties every year. We've been actually planning this since February. So once a month we have a meeting with the committee and the people on the farm of how we're going to pull this off, what we're going to do. This year we did include in the invitation all of the 4th graders in the public, private, charter schools, and home schools in the 3 counties are invited. And with our invitation this year, we offered the possibility of helping with funding with transportation. And that's what grew our numbers to the 900 kids. Normally they have about 300, 350. And we feel it's important to get the kids on the farm. We're so many generations removed from the farm that we need to educate the people. And if we can get to the children, it's easier to get to the adults. I'm sure we've all seen in the grocery store where a little toddler in the shopping cart will say, "Mommy, you can't buy that, there's too much fat in it." They don't have any idea what they're talking about really, but it's something they have heard. And so we need to tell them that no, there is not too much fat in milk, that milk is a good product to drink. And then on Saturday, September 9th, it is open to the public. It runs from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again, there will be the tours on the farm. There will be some of the learning stations, the rural road safety, the tractor safety, the animal nutrition, things like that. It's a free event, so it doesn't cost you anything to come. We're excited about it. We're very passionate about agriculture. You know, I'm getting to know a lot of the faces because this isn't my first time of being in front of you. And it's part of our mission of the farm is to educate people about agriculture. Farmers have been relying on other people telling their story. They're relying on marketers, on advertisers, on retailers of telling the story of agriculture, and we need to be telling our own story. And that's why we're offering this out to the public. Again, why we're here is, you know, nobody can tell our story as well as we can. No one can tell your story as well as you can. So we need to be talking to the public and getting the information out there to tell our story. A little bit about our farm. I can't give you too much or there won't be any reason to show up. We milk about 400 cows. We grow all of our own feed. Corn and alfalfa are what our products are. Everything is marketed through the animal. Animal nutrition is very, very important to us. If the cow doesn't feel good, just like you, if you don't feel good, you're not going to be very productive. Neither is she. So their diet is actually much more healthier than what I eat. And you know, what goes in must come out. So we have to deal with the manure. Yeah, we would like to not have it be an issue, but it's a big issue. We've got a lot of money stuck into manure storage. We've got probably about $1 million stuck into manure storage, equipment, things like that. It's a part of our business. It's not a negative to us. It's a resource. Our manure has been tested, so we know what's in it for phosphorus, nitrogen, and potassium. So therefore, we know how much we put on each field. We have to keep track of that when we spread the manure on the field. So we don't have to purchase as much commercial fertilizer if we have put the manure on it, because there's no sense to double up and spend money that we don't need to spend. We do bed our stalls with sand. Anybody that goes to the beach, you know your favorite place to lay on the beach is in the sand. You don't put your towel in the grass or in the parking lot. It generates a lot of sand, and we recycle that sand. You'd be able to see how we recycle the sand and use it over and over again in the stalls for the cows. All of our forage is kept in plastic bags. We put up 20 plastic bags every year. They're 12 feet in diameter, 300 feet long, to feed all of the animals that we have. So we generate an awful lot of plastic. And we now have a company that farmers in the area are able to recycle that plastic. And it's sent to Arkansas and made into garbage bags. But we don't have to do anything with it other than put it in the dumpster. We don't have to clean it or anything like that. So we're really excited about that. As owners of the land, we're the stewards of the land. Yes, I own this land, or my husband and I own this land, but we only own it in our lifetime. We need to take care of it and preserve it so the next generation that comes after us has got resources, land and water resources to deal with it. And our long-term success of our farm depends on how well we manage these resources. And I know there's been some discussion on the county board about CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations in the county. We are a larger farm. We are a family farm. I want to emphasize that. And we encourage each of you to come to Farm City Day to talk to us, talk to our employees, and talk to our neighbors. See what is really going on in there and gather information so if there does become a time when you need to have a discussion on CAFOs, that you can make an informed decision that is going to impact the importance of the agriculture businesses within Eau Claire County. We will be there in red shirts on September 9th. We've put a lot of work into this. I go all or nothing, and I have gone all forward into this thing. Find us in a red shirt, and I bet we can give you a ride in the tractor. And there might even be a little bit of reasoning behind that, because our farthest farm is 10 miles away, so we go up and down the roads an awful lot. So there's a little idea of what the roads are like out in our area. The cow laying down on the left is Annalise. She's kind of special to me because she is our oldest cow. She is 12 years old, and 2 weeks ago she had her 10th calf. and that's Anastasia on the right. She wouldn't pose very good for me because she wanted to eat, and I wanted to take her picture. I always have red, black, and white petunias out in front of our barn, so come and see my red, black, and white petunias and my red and black and white Holsteins. Our little niece, Tessa, she lives across the road. She loves to come and pet the calves, and she says you too can come and pet a calf at Farm City Days on September 9th. You all have some postcards in front of you. They're to stick on your fridge for Remember the Day. Does anybody have any questions for me or for any of us on anything?
Any questions? Judy?
I'm curious as to how you come up with the name Bears Grass.
Bears Grass Dairy, the area where we've built is known as Bears Grass Dairy. There used to be a church there and an old school years ago that was Bears Grass Valley. Bears Grass Creek runs along the edge of the farm. So that's the technical reason we came up with that. I say we came up with that so when we file bankruptcy and fail, nobody knows who we are.
Thank you so much for coming this evening.
If you come up with any questions, write them down on the back of this card and bring them with you on the 9th, and we'll be sure and answer them for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate your presentation. We'd like to go to one of our own, Eau Claire City County Health Department, Ms. Piquez.
Did you see where she attached it? Oh, we've got it. Technology. So I should have brought my own technical assistant, right? Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to do the every other year report to the county board. Special thanks to Supervisor Wilkie, who is on the Board of Health and part of the team that makes sure that our department continues to move forward and do the work that we need to do in the community. I've spoken to you a number of times before about specific topics. Now I'm going to talk to you generally about the health department. You'll hear me talk a lot about two things, prevention and partnerships, two core pieces of our department. We do have about a $5.8 million budget. Interesting to you may be that you didn't see any of our financial information in the reports that you just received. So just note that that is true. We are a separate entity from the county financials. So just as I listened to that very extensive report that Amy shared, do know that we do have a separate financial system we're in with the city financials. And so the county's role, county board's role, and the support that comes to the health department comes in the way of tax levy, which is a portion of our budget. Slides are small, so I will, and the colors are interesting, but this slide is showing you why prevention is important. Since 1993, for the first time in 2015, we are losing life expectancy in the U.S. We are not as healthy as we used to be. And one of the things that the health department will continue to focus on, and is our job to focus on, is making sure that people can be healthy. How are we healthy in the health department? What in our community creates health? Many people, and I've talked to many of you, say we need to make sure that health care is available to everybody. That is absolutely true. But we know from research that health care, clinical care, is only about 20% of why we're healthy, and most people are surprised at that. Why an individual is healthy and our community is healthy comes from lots of other things. Socioeconomic factors, whether you get an education, whether you have a job that can support your life, whether you live in a physical environment that is supportive, and if you have healthy behaviors, all are bigger factors than whether you have access to care. Again, access to care remains critically important. I've shared with some of you the Public Health Classic story about the river, and I'm going to do it again because I want you to leave with prevention in your head about what we do in public health. We know that we have great need for and great systems in place for people that are proverbially in the river. They are drowning. We have great systems to pull them out of the river. We have great systems to treat them once they come out of the river. We have great ways to make sure that we are supporting people once there is a problem. And that's really important. I'm not here to tell you that that's not important. What I am here to tell you, though, is that it's important to go upstream and figure out why they're in the river. And that's public health. Prevention is figuring out why are people either jumping or falling into that proverbial river and doing something about it. Why should you guys care about that? You manage an enormous amount of county tax levy that goes into many of those programs and services that are involved with pulling people out of the river. And we don't have enough money to do that in the way that we need to forever if people keep jumping into the river. Going upstream, doing prevention, does cost money. But in the end, it will save an enormous amount of money. What are some of the things we do upstream to support being healthier? These are the things that you see in the budget that we present to you every year. We focus on these program areas: healthy homes and places, safe food and water, healthy beginnings, the start of life, communicable disease, which I spoke with all of you about earlier this month, I guess, chronic disease prevention, and general healthy living. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of things that we do at the health department right now and things that we'd like to spend more time doing. We deal with homes that are challenged in this community. I was on the phone this morning about a home in this community that has rats, something that you wouldn't think that we have in Eau Claire County, but in fact, we do. One example of many situations that create unhealth in our community. This is peeling paint from a ceiling. Lead poisoning is an issue in this community. We work on healthy places and healthy restaurants to be sure that people wash their hands. So how many of you ate in a restaurant in Eau Claire County in the last month? Okay, how many of you got sick? Hopefully none of you. We inspect those restaurants and try and make sure that people stay healthy. We test the water. Unfortunately, many of you have seen many advisories about beaches being closed this year. We test that water. We have a public health lab that makes sure that we know that that water is safe and people can be at the beaches. We also do programs for families that make sure, it's interesting, sorry, that make sure that we have safe pregnancies and engaged parents at birth. Nurse Family Partnership is one of those programs, a very intensive home visitation program. That is actually a family in Eau Claire County with one of our public health nurses. The family started out having a very challenging pregnancy and ended with this picture at birth, very engaged family. We also have the WIC program, a program that serves pregnant women and children. We work on communicable disease issues like ticks and chlamydia. We talked a little bit about that earlier. And we work on things like suicide prevention. Finally, we spend a lot of time focused on community. This slide talks a little bit about Eau Claire Healthy Communities, our community collaborative that focuses on these 5 areas: mental health, chronic disease, high-risk alcohol use, oral health, and healthy relationships. A really critical partnership that's making huge strides forward in community issues. We're 75 years old, so those of you that were able to come to the 75-year celebration last year in 2016, we are a city-county health department for 75 years. We are one of 2 city-county health departments in the state, something that many people in Eau Claire County are very proud of, that we have a unique structure, and we have action and activities that are really making a difference in this community. I do want to particularly thank you for your support, your questions, your involvement in collaborative efforts. The partnerships that we have across the county have made an enormous difference. We do have challenges. So we have health issues that are getting worse in this community that we are not preventing. We've spoken about communicable disease, but we also have enormous issues related to chronic diseases and obesity. We have challenges related to families that are struggling with having healthy starts to life because of poverty, because of issues around generations of not having good parenting skills. We know we can do things about those issues. We know that we can spend more time, particularly working with new families, moms, dads, and babies, but we certainly don't right now have the resources for that. We also know that we have enormous water issues in this community to pay attention to. We want safe and healthy water. We want to have safe and healthy food. Those are all things that the health department also pays attention to. I invite you, if you haven't been down to the health department, to come down. Many are surprised at what we have right below you, and if you haven't been there, I please welcome you to do that. We have an enormous public health lab that really works hard to have strong chemical and biologic testing happening. Many people don't realize that. It's very unique in this part of the state. And we also have a very strong team of dedicated staff that do the work that we hope makes a difference in the community. So again, thank you for your support, and I'm certainly willing to answer questions.
Any questions? Iska, you might be interested to know that the WCA Resolution Committee passed forward your request for additional funding, yours and other health department, to the full WCA organization.
Related to communicable? Yeah,
yes.
Good, wonderful. So again, that reminder that county tax levy and city tax levy pay for communicable disease support. We get no state dollars for that. And again, I shared that with you when I was here previously. It's a surprise to most people that there are no state dollars for public health.
Supervisor Buchanan.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank you for your presentation and all of the work that you've been doing. And just as you were speaking, a few different thoughts kind of popped in my mind, so they're not in any one specific order. But you had made the comment like, why do we care as county board supervisors? And you talked about our duties and how this comes from our budget. But that very first slide you mentioned is also another aspect of it, of that decreasing life expectancy. I mean, we could balance our budgets very easy if we didn't care about the health and welfare of residents and we only cared about numbers on a spreadsheet. And so how do we manage those resources in a way that's wise? And you had mentioned something I think that was very powerful, is that prevention, yes, has a financial component that may look like a loss on our budget sheet, but if we only look at it in one specific year, it has a cost with no revenue. But 5 years from now, there's a line item that we will never see that helps us long term. I was just thinking about that because as you talked about obesity, I know that Eau Claire is known as being one or two in the entire state of Wisconsin for our bike trails. And that's actually used for generating economic growth. People want to live here because of our quality of life. But it's also a health issue. And so the way that we spend those dollars isn't just in if we think of ourselves as need to have and nice to have, is we need to have a police department, we need to have a sheriff's department, and then these other things are just nice to have, so we can't really necessarily afford them. But if we look at them in a different lens, such as you're pointing out, they're absolutely need to haves for many people. The last thing I want to say is there's a little photo that I keep on my desktop, because you talked about mold, but when we also talk about things like lead, there's this graph that tracks 23 years apart lead levels in the air versus homicide rates 23 years later. And that graph trend line is almost exactly the same. And you keep seeing this spike, and all of a sudden, just after 1990, it collapses down. And that's 23 years earlier, people weren't breathing lead. And so when we talk about all of the aspects of when we go into individual people's homes, that has a real impact on people's lives. So just thanks for the work that you're doing. And I highlighted all this because that's the role that we have to play in government. It isn't just individual people making individual choices. It's how the actions that we take here in this body influence the choices that people are able to make.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment. We often say in public health that it's our job to make the healthy choice, the easy choice. Not everybody has an easy choice to make when they need to be healthy. So thank you for that.
Supervisor Selges.
Thank you. Yeah, I too want to thank you for all the great work that you do. It seems like the number of fronts that you could be battling upon are nearly endless. And, if you look back over history, I think that there have been some great success stories in public health. One of the few areas that you can point to and say, wow, taking a few actions has made a huge impact on society. So one that's in the news today a lot, of course, is drug use and the opioid crisis. I was thinking maybe you could talk a little bit about that and your role versus, it ultimately coming through our criminal justice system.
Yeah. Thank you for that opportunity. The question is related to opioid and heroin use, as well as other drugs. So Eau Claire County certainly is impacted, as all of you know, by methamphetamine use, and the health department has been very involved in conversations and efforts around prevention for a variety of drugs and other substances. We have more recently gotten some grant funding to support some work around opioid prevention. That really has involved primarily working with people that are prescribing and working on education around prescribing, working with pharmacies around take back, and working with their clients to understand what they are actually taking as an opioid, and then working on broad-based across the county collection efforts. Some of you may have seen, or you can find on our health department webpage, little video clips. Again, many people learn that way about how do you actually take your medications and bring them to the drop box at the various places around the county. It's a barrier to people. They just don't know quite what to do with those medications. Small examples of some of the prevention efforts. We do know we work a lot with high school and middle school kids. We have strong programming with a Drug Free Communities grant right now. It's a short-term federal grant to really look at supporting kids with having resilience so they don't start using some of these substances. It's another big part of the effort. And access to people's medication is one of those things that we are starting to see a slow trend line down. Kids in high schools, and I don't have the data in front of me, but found it very easy to get other people's prescription medications previously. And we're starting to see that trend line turn down a bit. So part of that is the educational work that we need to do. Access is a big issue, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or other substances, and so we certainly work on that access issue a lot.
Well, thank you very much for that very informative report.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to call to your attention two other items on your agenda packet. Written reports for the contingency fund and Chippewa Valley Regional first and second quarter estimate operation report. And also on your desk, you will see a number of items, not just including the Farm City reminder for your refrigerator, but a magazine from ADRC and a very worthwhile organization to become involved with to encourage you to join the United Way. Are there any other communications that other people feel that they would like to give? Supervisor Clark, looking for your spot here. There you go.
And you found me. I would like to invite people to a celebration and ribbon cutting tomorrow afternoon at Beaver Creek Reserve. We are having a celebration of our newly installed solar panel roof. The Nature Center at Beaver Creek Reserve will be completely energy self-sufficient. And the ribbon cutting is tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Come and see the installation of solar panels on the roof. It's quite amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also, two other items that you'll find in your packet, and one is a rezoning request, letter, and correspondence from our Senator Tammy Baldwin. Now we'll move on to the first readings of our ordinances by committee, and these are items that are likely to be referred. Clerk will read them, please.
File number 20, to amend section 16.30.529A1 of the code to be amended to read county forest use regulations.
Please have that for our next meeting on the 19th.
File number 44 is an ordinance that makes changes to the county code of 2.90 as part of the strategic plan process.
And that will also come back on the 19th.
File 47 is an ordinance to make changes to the county code entitled 4, 17, and 18 as part of the strategic plan process.
Next meeting.
File number 53, to amend section 2.44 of the county code as part of the strategic plan process.
And we'll look for that also to come back on the 19th. Under number 10 on your agenda, we're going to continue with a number of amendments and such as we clean up our code. So this comes out of the Committee on Administration, and let's move right through those.
File number 34 is an ordinance to make changes to chapters 3.50 and 3.85 of the county code as part of the strategic plan process.
And Kathy Clark, Supervisor Clark, do you want to add anything?
Motion first.
A motion, excuse me, I need it first. Supervisor Clark, Supervisor LaBelle as the second. Please.
It's important that as a board we periodically review the county code to make sure that our code is in compliance with state statutes and to correct things as minimal as typos and grammar and redundancies, and to clarify some of the meanings that may have made lots of sense when they were written all those years ago and now need to be clarified some. The Corporation Counsel's Office has been very busy working on this review, and we have 3 ordinances before us tonight to make the necessary amendments to the code. The first one actually has 6 changes that are all really well documented and explained on the fact sheet. There really aren't any substantive changes. Section 6 just includes, changes it to include all employees rather than just union employees. And that is the only change that really changes it on that. I'd be happy to answer questions, but if you ask a question I don't know, I'm turning it over to Keith.
Are there any questions, please? Supervisor Leary.
Thank you. I did have a question. I know they're talking in a number of these about eliminating a footnote, but they don't tell us what the footnote's about. I know a lot of footnotes are boring little numbers and they don't say too much, but what are they about and why do they need to be eliminated?
That's a question for Keith.
And you're on.
Has anybody ever read any of the footnotes in the county code, other than me? So, what the, Stella. So one of the things with the footnotes is as code gets reformatted, they sometimes end up on a different page. The other problem is footnotes get out of date too, and they're really not all that directory. So we're eliminating the footnotes because we've never received a comment that footnotes help anybody navigate the code. And if there's anything important in a footnote that's not in the code, we try to incorporate it into the code. But otherwise, it's just something else that we have to try to change when we're looking at the code. So that's why the footnotes are coming out.
I was just going to say that would have been helpful to have in the explanation, you know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well taken.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any, and so it looks like you're ready to vote on this particular ordinance. So I would encourage you to take out your keypad and vote for this particular issue. Vote on this issue. And that passes unanimously. On to the next ordinance, please.
File number 35, this ordinance makes changes to Title 10 of the county code as part of the strategic plan process.
A motion, please. By Supervisor Gatlin, seconded by Supervisor Crump. And discussion on this, Supervisor Clark.
Again, this one is basically housekeeping with a couple of exceptions. Section 7 signifies and changes from an ordinance being needed for designation of ATV routes, excuse me, which now with this change become the responsibility of the Highway Committee, and no ordinance is then required. And Section 8 reduces the amount of time that an abandoned vehicle is kept in the impoundment. It reduces the amount of time from 120 days to 60 days. And that is basically due to lack of space and space needs. And so that, the rest is pretty well explained on the page.
Are there any questions on this particular ordinance? I'm not seeing any, so it looks like you're ready to vote. Oh, excuse me.
No,
Supervisor.
I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. And so please take your keypad and vote on ordinance 035. And that passes unanimously. And so we'll move on to the next one, please.
File number 38 is an ordinance to make changes in the Eau Claire County Code, Chapter 2.28 and Title 9 as part of the strategic plan process. Also, if you wouldn't mind an editorial correction to line 43 on the first page, and it would be just taking the word out of R-A-R-E to make that sentence clear.
Thank you. I would look for a motion by Supervisor Crowley, second by Supervisor Wilkie. Any discussion? I'm not seeing any, so once again, please vote on this issue. Oh, do you want to give an explanation here?
It's just pretty self-explanatory.
I thought, thank you much. Please use your keypad and vote.
Are we, the correction that Janet put in is going to be part of this correction?
Thank you. And once again, that's unanimous vote, and it passes.
File number 46, moving the 2017 annual meeting on the budget from November 14, 2017 to November 7, 2017.
A motion by Supervisor Lavelle, seconded by Supervisor Wilkie, and discussion, Supervisor Clark.
This is very self-explanatory. There's a reason for it, and that's a report that has to be filed with the state. This gives the Finance Committee and the Finance Department time to compile that report and get it off before the 15th deadline. So I urge your support.
Any further comments? Supervisor, I couldn't tell which one of you here. Supervisor Pagonis?
According to my calendar, November 7th is election day, and I thought...
There isn't one.
Not this fall.
There isn't an election that day?
No.
Not this fall. Not in the odd years.
Okay, so I can cross that out.
Correct.
Thank
For
you.
this year.
Thank you. Supervisor DeLuca, please.
So on the calendar, we were recommended the 14th and the 15th for budget. Does that now mean we're the 7th and the 8th? Okay, and does that then move the regular county board for that meeting for that month to the 14th?
The 7th would be the regular
I think the 7th is the regular county board meeting. And there
Okay.
would not be another county board meeting in November, is that correct?
Well, we did have at one time the 14th and 15th for budget and county board on the 7th. So I was wondering, is it just flip-flopping?
The county board could have another meeting if they needed one, but this is not flip-flopping them. It is to accommodate the schedule that we need to meet in order to fulfill the requirements of the state.
Right, I understand that, and I don't have any problem with that. I'm just asking, will there be a regular county board meeting then scheduled for Tuesday, the 14th?
And actually, that would, I believe that's the one that would fall within the regular schedule, so yes, there would, for regular business.
Okay.
Yes.
7th would be, but not the 14th.
Not the 14th, okay, thank you.
So that would be the 7th and the 8th would be the only meeting for that month then?
Unless needed another one.
Unless.
The board can always make the decision to hold another meeting if indeed there is business enough to warrant it.
Okay.
So I think that leaving it as right now not necessary doesn't mean that there may not be the call for it.
Okay, thank you.
You're certainly welcome. Call for the vote. And no more, I don't, excuse me, I have one more. Supervisor Dunn.
Part of it goes to Supervisor DeLuca's questions also. It would be possible to have general business on the 7th if necessary. So, I mean, we've done that in the past also, in order to keep one meeting in the month.
I believe the discussion at the time this came up before the administration committee was that there would be an opportunity before we began the budget process to have a general meeting on the 7th.
Okay, and that does extend into the 8th as necessary.
It can be extended if necessary. I don't have anyone else who's wishing to comment, so please take your keypads and vote on this issue. Supervisor McKinney?
And Supervisor Clem?
Technology is really wonderful, especially if it works. There we go. And there we are, and that passes unanimously as well. And now we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, and this is coming out of Judiciary and Law.
File number 52, affirming the need for a sixth Circuit Court judge for Eau Claire County.
Supervisor Miller, are you wanting to give an explanation? Oh, we need a motion first. Supervisor Leary and Supervisor Conlon and Supervisor Miller, would you like to give an explanation? I'll get that.
I would be happy to do that. And the committee members, please feel free to jump in if I forget something or overlook something. First, I'd like to point out that for many of you here, the last judgeship added to Eau Claire County was actually back in 1994. And that was based on actions this body had taken. In fact, there are a couple of people in this room tonight, I think, were here then as well, had put forth a similar resolution around 1991. So this isn't something that's going to just happen overnight. It's going to take some time to get through the whole legislative process. And I bring it up for that reason, that it's going to take some time. But also, the other reason for pointing that out is that the population in Eau Claire County in 1994, or back up, in 1990 census, was just slightly over 85,000 people. Now, 26 years later plus, we've had projections indicating Eau Claire County well over 100,000 people. So we keep growing, and a lot is going on. One of the things that, if you had the opportunity to read through some of the materials, in short, the letter from the 10th District Judge, Scott Needham, pointed out, is that right now, with the case filings and the caseload of our judges, we're going through Eau Claire County, we could actually, it warrants 8 judges, and we're just asking for 1, or consideration for 1, I should say. The most recent years shows that the trend has continued to go up as far as the case filings and caseloads. If you noticed in 2014, 15, and 16, already it was pointing out we could have 7, 7.5, and 8 judges. And I think that says a lot. Now, this county has been very, very aggressive in alternatives to incarceration, which has definitely helped with the population in the jail. But they still need to have judicial oversight to make that consideration or go in one direction or another. And as you have heard over and over and over in the last several months, we've had an incredible increase in just drug cases alone that need a lot of attention. Another area of criteria to speak to a new judgeship is the infrastructure or the space. And we have that. On 2nd floor, you remember, we vacated a county boardroom, but left it intact so that it would be usable should we need something like this in the future. I believe that included in the packet was some rough estimates that Matt Tyson had put together, just kind of saying, yeah, we did it this way or that way kind of thing, in terms of the cost for the remodeling of it. And then in addition to that, there was also the additional costs for staffing and so on for the judge's office. Now keep in mind, now the judge and the is it court clerk?
I think it's a recorder.
That would be the one that that's being paid by the state. Yeah, okay. But there would be still some additional staff that the county would have to supply. So there's 3 criteria that have to be in order to be considered. One is the need, it's definitely there. One is the space, we have it. And the other is the local support. So I strongly encourage your support this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. I have Supervisor Lavelle with a request to speak. And did you push your button? Supervisor Lavelle?
I did it a long time ago. Sorry.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak to this issue? Liza, I'm not sure they know. Supervisor Wilkie?
Thank you, Sue, for pointing out that some of us might have been here for that last judgeship, I think. Having been one of those, I know that this is a long process, and it's wise that we are being proactive in bringing forward this resolution. But it's far from a done deal at this point. Now, we recognize we're a growing community, and the need is clearly there. But we got a long ways to go. But a big step would be this evening that if we can give a strong, unified signal through this resolution, the message that we support will go a long way towards encouraging the state to include Eau Claire County in its budget for a judgeship. Along with that, of course, our legislators are going to have to assist us in this process. So I would encourage that if we have a legislative breakfast, and even better, if you as individuals have contact with your representatives, speak to them about this. They should be being our voice in Madison to try to make sure, pending our passage of this evening, that this get included in the budget. So I'd go on record in support of this resolution and encourage strong, hopefully even unanimous support from this board.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor McKinney, please.
I don't have my
Oh, I'm getting some really interesting little yellow lines here. Supervisor Olson.
Thank you. I guess one question is, are we looking, what are the dates of still is something that we'd be looking at is the 2019 budget, 2020 budget, where?
19.
I'm wondering if you'd like to add to that.
I believe that I can speak to that. What we will accomplish after the board puts this resolution forward is that we will include monies in our capital budget even in this current budget year so that we can begin to do some of the work to make sure that we have the adequate space to house the additional judge. Also, what we will do is we will actually then have to incorporate into the 2019 budget the additional operational dollars. I believe that the start date for the judge would actually be August of 2019 if it is approved and allowed by the state and it goes through that process. That would be the soonest that we would actually see that judge in-house. And so we would have made plans for, of course, the space and all the operational needs prior to that.
I guess that was my question is, if we're looking at, like August of 19, means, what are we looking at a timeline to construct? Is this a year project to construct, to get the space available? Is it something that we've done, so is it something that's going to necessarily be have to be put in to the budget we vote on in November to allocate the money, because we're going to be spending it rather?
We'll begin in 2018.
So it will be in this budget.
Yes.
Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you. If I read correctly, it's a timing issue right now that they're currently considering throughout the state all of the judges in areas that need more judges, and so it's kind of important that if we want to get in on the state funding, we have to do it at this time. Is that correct?
Correct.
I mean, at least the resolution, we can think about how we're going to fund it, but throughout the years, but we need to kind of get in on the state dollars now, correct?
Go ahead.
Actually, it's before the chief judge uses the weighted caseload to identify where need is. Eau Claire has been identified as having the need for an additional judge. And so the chief judge for the district puts together the application to the state for the judgeships. They work together to decide where those will be, and one of the determining factors is the willingness of the board to meet the county's portion of that agreement, because the county provides the space, and so that's actually required. And so yes, the timing in many respects is driven by the state budget and when the chief judge believes it's appropriate to be asking for this type of an additional judgeship. So the timing in some regards is outside of our control, and you are correct. The board can indicate its desire to do this at this point in time, and then we will continue to work through the details to actually make it a reality.
Thank you.
Supervisor Cotton?
Yeah, I thought I understood what was going on, but now I'm confused again. This is a indication the county board and the county government supports the need for a judge.
Correct.
My understanding is we don't have to act until the judgeship has been approved by the state.
No,
Is that correct?
they ask for the county to be very clear and upfront, are you willing to take this on? And so actually, this is the action that will allow the judge to know whether or not to include Eau Claire County in the information that he puts forward to the legislature for inclusion at the state level. And so this is their ask of the county, are you, board, willing to support the addition of a 6th judgeship?
And that's in terms of the operational cost. Now, when we're talking about capital funding, does that mean we have to start borrowing the money right now before we even get it approved at the state level?
No, we would actually, we'll have, from a timing standpoint, we can incorporate that into the budget, and we can begin, we have adequate time to actually begin that process at the point that we know whether or not it's been approved as part of the state budget.
Will part of that be a needs budget to decide what we need in terms of additional facilities?
I'm not certain I understand your question.
The question is, you know, I've heard a number of different scenarios as to where we're going to put this and how we're going to put this and et cetera. Is that study going to be part of this additional funding?
Well, the study itself is already being undertaken currently as part of our master planning, and so that will be available to inform how we move forward and what we do, and so we can begin very quickly with the next phase of renovation.
Will that then be given to us before we commence the budget? Because we have to put it in the 2018 budget is what we're hearing, correct?
That is correct. We would put the capital dollars in the budget, but that doesn't mean we have to have all of the final planning done per se. So we do not have any timing issues that will inhibit this from moving forward.
So we can budget for it, but if the plan changes slightly, we can still accommodate that.
We can accommodate.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any, so please take your keypad to vote on whether or not you support our venturing forth to get a judge for, an additional judge for Eau Claire County. And I'm pleased to say that's a unanimous decision in favor of. So I think that there are those among us tonight who will be very happy about that particular vote. And let's move on to our next file, and that's the Committee on Planning and Development.
File number 36, amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Clear Creek.
Look for a motion, please. Motion by Supervisor Catlin and a second by Supervisor Cronk. Discussion. Look for an explanation from Gary Gibson, please.
Oh, we're on. Thank you.
There you go.
Okay, this is a rezoning petition to rezone 20 acres from agricultural preservation to a 3 agriculture district to allow the property owner to sell 10 acres, which will be added to the neighbor's property owners, to his property, and then the remaining 20 acres to conform with the zoning requirements for minimum acreage. Now, this was approved or recommended by the town of Clear Creek, Planning Development, and It does fit in with all the comprehensive plan for the county and for Clear Creek. And this was approved by the Planning and Development Committee. Now, some of the reasoning for approval is it is consistent with the goals and objectives and policies of the town of Clear Creek. The existing uses in the area include a mixture of croplands, woodlands, and single-family residence, and the property is included in the county farmland preservation plan, but this rezoning action will not remove productive farmland from production, so I would recommend approval.
Thank you for that explanation. Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you. I just have a question on page 59, under the town board action. I believe it's just a typo maybe, Pleasant Valley Town Board versus Town of Clear Creek.
I believe that might be correct.
I'm going to guess that that's probably a typo.
Thank you very much, and so.
Because if you look at just above that where it talks about rural preservation, it does include the town of Clear Creek, their intent and their description.
Okay. And my other question was, so they have 29.41 acres, and they're selling 10 of those acres. Does that leave them with 19.41 acres left instead of 20?
That's probably approximate, but
You're looking for an editorial change to the numbers.
Well, I was just asking because I thought there was a requirement you had to have 20 acres for certain zoning, and
yeah, A3 is a minimum of 20.
okay, but they're selling 10 of the 29.41, so that must leave them with 19.41 left. They have 20 plus?
It says 20 plus or minus.
Is there someone else that could answer that question?
Yeah,
Please. Does the board object to having an individual, I suspect might be one of the owners, give the information? I hear no.
Yes.
Please come to the mic. Introduce yourself too, please.
Okay, my name is Eric Knauf with American Land Surveying, and what you're seeing in your report is in fact a slight error. You are correct that the A3, the parcel which is to be rezoned to A3 doesn't in fact have to be 20 acres. So the remaining acreage, which is going to be sold to an adjoining landowner, is going to be, there's an approximated acreage here. So there's going to be a little bit of flex until which time the land is surveyed and that acreage is calculated exactly. So there's going to be a little bit of flexibility on how much acreage is actually being sold to the neighbor, and the number that you've been provided with is an approximated value.
And based on that resurvey, it actually says here for the request it is 20 acres plus or minus.
Okay. So basically maybe the neighbor doesn't get exactly 10 acres, they'll.
Exactly. We still have to meet the county minimum requirements for the county subdivision ordinance.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for that explanation.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, please take your keypad and vote as to whether or not you wish to support this rezoning. And I think Deb Craney is out of the room right now. So would you take him off the?
I did.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you for that. And let's move on to the next file, please.
File number 39. Am I coming over the, is it coming over? File number 39. File 39, amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Pleasant Valley.
Is there a motion, please? Supervisor Lavelle and Supervisor Olson as the second. An explanation by Supervisor Gary Gibson.
Right, thank you. I guess I'll start on this one because it's the same thing, and for all rezoning, it will state in here that this request is to rezone 25 acres plus or minus from AP agriculture to District A3 agriculture, which is going to allow the property owner to sell the property with the existing home and retain the remainder of the 80-acre property. Now, to explain again, the plus or minus in here, what that means is a lot of that isn't definite until after it's approved so that they can go in and survey. Now, in this one here, the town of Pleasant Valley has recommended approval. Planning and Development Department has recommended approval. It fits in with Eau Claire County's and Pleasant Valley's comprehensive plan. And the committee has voted to approve this. This property here also is very similar to the last request. So the goals, objectives, and policies of the town of Pleasant Valley and Eau Claire County comprehensive plans have been met. Existing uses in the area include mixtures of cropland, woodlands, farming, and non-farming housing. And also, this property is included in the county farmland preservation plan, but no agriculture operations have taken place on the property recently, but the agriculture is restricted due to soil types and topographies, and this proposed rezoning will not remove productive farmland from cultivation. So I would ask for everybody's approval.
Thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions? And I'm not seeing any, so I would ask that you use your keypad to vote, either to support or not amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Pleasant Valley.
Supervisor Wilkie?
And that also, I believe, that really flashed, but I believe that was a unanimous vote, and it was. Thank you very much. The next file is out of the Highway Committee.
File number 42, to amend section 10.01.080 of the code, County Highway H.
And is there a motion, please? By Supervisor Larry, seconded by Supervisor Henry. An explanation by Supervisor Henry.
This is a congested area north of Fairtown due to the building and stuff at Black River Lodge that people have been doing. And so to accommodate the safety, the speed limit is being reduced to 45 to up to there, which would be just south of the TV tower.
Thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions in regard to this particular file? Seeing none, please take your keypads and vote on this particular file, 42, please. And that also is unanimous support. Thank you. Next, go on to the files under Committee on Finance and Budget.
File number 45, to disallow the claim of Zhu Wang filed on July 14, 2017 against Eau Claire County and directing the county clerk to notify the claimant of said disallowance.
And a motion by Supervisor Conlon and a second by Supervisor Lavelle. Explanation, Supervisor Dunning?
This was, this is a lawsuit that stemmed from a person believing that there was a perjury committed against him, and the insurance company has reviewed it. Our attorney has reviewed it and recommends that we have no liability for this case.
Thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions? Supervisor Conlon?
Yeah, the charge is against a Eau Claire City police officer. We have no employees in this case, so it doesn't deal with any of our employees or any of the county officials at all.
Thank you for that additional information. Any other questions or comments? If not, please take your keypad and vote on disallowing this claim. And that passes also unanimously.
File number 49, disallowing the claim of Nesreen Carisha filed on July 26, 2017 against Eau Claire County and directing the county clerk to notify the claimant of said disallowance.
I would look for a motion. Supervisor Schreier and seconded by Supervisor Schleifer. Discussion. Any comments? Please an explanation by Supervisor Dunning.
This resulted from a person who was injured in a fall in the long-term parking at the Chippewa Valley Regional Airport in December of 2016. Our insurance company has reviewed it and determined that we have no liability. There did not appear to, at least in the explanation we were given, to be any circumstances that would lead us to think otherwise.
Thank you for that explanation. And Supervisor DeLuca?
Does the airport have cameras that show the parking lot so that if there were incidences or accidents that they would have notification of it?
I'm not familiar with it. I see some heads nodding, but I don't.
Please, Keith?
There are cameras that cover most of the airport, and that's one of the things that was reviewed by our insurance carrier. The specifics, it was snowing at that time. The person indicated they fell on some black ice right next to their car. The walkways were all sanded and salted. There's not liability on the county's part. Once we're made aware of those situations, well, then the maintenance people do go out and take care of those. So, to answer your first question, there are cameras that record some of that provided some information. That was part of the information that was provided to the insurance carrier for their review. There's also an incident report that was filled out and a report to the airport manager that was reviewed.
So was it shown on the video that this person actually fell?
I don't think there's any question that the person fell.
Oh, okay.
The person did fall, and the person did break their wrist.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? I'm not seeing any, so please take your keypad and vote on disallowing the claim of Nesreen Carisha. And that has passed with the exception of one vote. Now we'll move on.
File number 50, authorizing payment of vouchers over 10,000 issued during the month of July 2017.
Is there a motion? Supervisor Hennig and Supervisor Mortimer is the second. Discussion by Supervisor Denning.
Well, they're listed there, and if there's any questions, we'll try to answer them.
Any questions on the Supervisor Liddell, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 30, Venture Architects, it's Facilities Master Plan Professional Services, but it's got maintenance and ag center. What did they do with maintenance and ag center?
Would you like to explain that?
I don't know that they may have had some specificity on the areas where they've been working. They are looking at all of the county-owned properties as part of the master planning process. That would include everything encompassed by maintenance as well as the agricultural center. So I don't exactly know why that detail is in there, but I do know that they've covered all of our real property assets.
Supervisor DeLuca, please.
Thank you. I'm asking a lot of questions tonight. On line 27 and 36, workman's compensation, what does it mean by replenishment?
27.
SIR, impressed, replenishment.
I'm looking to see if someone has an answer to that.
Line 27 and 36.
I'm not sure. I will have to research that and get back to you on that, exactly what that means. The Wisconsin Mutual, or Municipal Mutual, is our insurance carrier in that. What that specific descriptor means, I will research for you.
Okay, and then I had a second question. Line 45, the refund to the Eau Claire's Festival. Can you explain that?
Typically, when agencies or events are going to be held, monies are set aside for liability purposes, and then it is refunded after the event. It's similar to when you rent a room at the library or somewhere else and you pay a $50 security deposit, that after you leave, you have it all cleaned up and there are no problems, it's refunded to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any, so please take your keypad to vote on the voucher file.
Supervisor Olson?
There we go. And that passes unanimously. We have just a couple other issues here to take care of. On the appointments under number 11, the appointment of Rod Esslinger as Planning and Developing Director. And I'm not sure who's going to speak to this. This came out of the Administration Committee, I think, advice to the chair.
The first appointment of Rod Esslinger is actually as the Director of the Planning and Development Department, and either Gary Gibson or I can speak to that from that standpoint, because the committee reviewed that as well. Rod is an individual who has more than 20 years of experience in planning, development, land conservation, and a very wide array. I think there's quite a bit of detail in your agenda packet. He has been an employee of Eau Claire County for a number of years and will be able to fill the role, and has been filling the role in the interim capacity. And the recommendation is supported by the committee.
Thank you for that explanation. I would look for a motion by Supervisor Henning, seconded by Supervisor Cronick. Any discussion? Anyone wishing to speak? I don't see any, so please take your keypad and vote on this appointment. Oh, I'm Gibson. Thank you, and that is a unanimous consent. The motion carries. And the next one is the appointment of Gabriel Schliebe to the Human Services Board. And I'm looking for a Human Services Board member that, or you could. I came to administration. Kathy, would you speak to this?
Sure. There was a vacancy on the Human Services Board, and we had a couple of applicants. And Gabriel Schliebe, who is grandson, is he a grandson of Jean Schliebe? Applied. He is a consumer of human services, and that was kind of the type of vacancy filler that the board was looking for, and so it was recommended, and our chair, our county board chair, recommends to you that Mr. Schliebe be appointed.
Are there any questions or comments? I'm not seeing anything. So please take your keyboard and vote. There we go. And again, this is unanimous decision to accept that particular individual to the Human Services Board. We've accomplished our agenda, and Nick is nodding at me, no, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. And thank you especially for putting up with my attempt to fill in for our county board chair who is enjoying some time in Canada.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.